What's up, everyone? Before we dive into tonight's terrifying tale, if you're new here, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming. And if this story sends chills down your spine, smash that like button. It really helps us bring you more bone-chilling content. Now let me ask you something. Have you ever felt different when wearing a particular piece of clothing? Maybe a leather jacket that made you feel invincible? A dress that transformed your confidence? We all have that one item in our wardrobe that somehow changes us. But what if I told you that sometimes that change isn't just psychological? What if certain objects, simple, everyday objects, could unlock something dark within us, something we never knew existed? Throughout history, cultures around the world have spoken of cursed objects. The Japanese have their tsukumogami, objects that gain souls after 100 years. In European folklore, we hear tales of enchanted garments that drive their wearers to madness. Even modern psychology recognizes a phenomenon called enclothed cognition, a systematic influence that clothes have on the wearer's psychological processes. But where does psychology end and something far more sinister begin? Tonight's story is based on journal entries discovered after a series of unexplained violent incidents. The writer's identity remains unknown to this day. Authorities found these pages hidden in an abandoned apartment, the walls covered in strange markings, and in the center of the room, a single black hoodie neatly folded, waiting. They call him the Hooded Man, and this is his descent into darkness. Are you ready? Then turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and let's begin. April 3rd, 2004. That's when it all started. That's the date that marks the beginning of the end for a young man whose name we'll never know. Let's call him Alex. Just an ordinary guy, living an ordinary life in an ordinary town. Nothing special, nothing remarkable. Just another face in the crowd. Picture this. It's early spring, but winter hasn't quite released its grip. The kind of cold that seeps into your bones, that makes you pull your thin t-shirt tighter around your chest as you walk down the street. Alex had been feeling that cold for weeks. He didn't have much. Just some worn-out t-shirts and a couple pairs of jeans. Money was tight. It always was. But on this particular day, he decided enough was enough. He needed a jacket. Something warm, something affordable. So he walked into this local thrift store. You know the type. Fluorescent lights flickering overhead. That musty smell of old fabric and forgotten memories. Racks packed so tight you can barely move between them. The kind of place where people's old lives go to wait for new owners. He was browsing through the jacket section, pushing hangers aside one by one when he saw it. Hanging there between a faded denim jacket and a stained windbreaker. A black hoodie. Simple. Clean. With a white lining inside that created this stark contrast. Nothing fancy, nothing expensive, but something about it caught his eye. He reached out and touched the fabric. Soft. Surprisingly soft for something in a thrift store. He pulled it off the rack and held it up. It looked about his size. Without really thinking about it, he slipped it on. And that's when he felt it. At first moment. That initial spark. It fit perfectly. Like it had been made specifically for him. He walked over to the mirror near the fitting rooms, and when he saw his reflection, something shifted. He couldn't quite explain it, even in his journal, but he felt different, confident, powerful, like he could do anything. The store attendant, an older woman with tired eyes and a kind smile, looked up from her magazine. "That suits you fine," she said, nodding with approval. "Really brings out your features." "Thanks," he replied, surprising himself with how polite he sounded. Common courtesy is so hard to find these days, he thought. And isn't that interesting? His first thought while wearing the hoodie was about how rare politeness had become, about how people had lost their manners, their respect, as if he was already beginning to judge the world around him. He bought it. $15. A steal, really. And from that moment on, he didn't take it off. Think about that for a second. He didn't take it off. Not when he got home, not when he ate dinner, not even when he went to bed that night. He wore it constantly, like a second skin, and every time he looked in the mirror, he smiled. Not a happy smile. No, it was a smirk. The kind of smile that knows something others don't. The kind of smile that holds secrets. He wrote in his journal that night, "I feel amazing. I can't really explain it, but I like it. I really like it. I feel the need to put my hood up. Something about the hood has a way of masking a person. Even though it shows their face, it hides something, somewhere." What did he mean by that? What was being hidden? His identity, his intentions, or something deeper, something within him that was just beginning to wake up? He stayed up late that night, just staring at himself in the mirror, hood up, shadows playing across his face. Time flew around him, he wrote. Hours passed like minutes, and when he finally went to sleep, he dreamed of power, of control, of doing amazing things. But what kind of amazing things? That's the question that should have been asked. That's the warning sign that was missed. April 10th, 1 week later. 7 days of wearing that hoodie constantly. 7 days of feeling that growing confidence, that swelling sense of superiority. Alex walked through the school hallways like he owned them. His posture had changed. His gait had changed. Everything about him radiated this new arrogance. He wrote that he was sure he looked smug, and he was right. People noticed. They whispered. They stared. And one person in particular took offense to this transformation. Jack. Now, Jack had known Alex for years. They weren't friends, but they weren't enemies either. They existed in that neutral space that most acquaintances occupy. But Jack saw the change in Alex. He saw the smirk, the confidence, the way Alex seemed to look down on everyone now. And Jack didn't like it. So he confronted him. Right there in the hallway between third and fourth period, with dozens of students watching. The crowd that always forms when tension rises, that hungry audience waiting for drama to unfold. "What's your problem, man?" Jack said, stepping into Alex's path. "You've been walking around here like you're some kind of big shot, like you're better than everyone else." Alex stopped, slowly raised his head, and smiled. That same smirk he'd been practicing in the mirror. "I don't have a problem, Jack," he said calmly. "Do you?" The crowd tightened. Someone whispered, "Oh, this is going to be good." Jack's face flushed red. "Yeah, I do have a problem. I have a problem with you acting like..." "Like what?" Alex interrupted, his voice steady, cold. "Like I'm confident? Like I know my worth? That bothers you?" And here's where it gets interesting. Alex wrote in his journal that Jack was angry because ignoring an insult was more insulting than responding with shrewd comments about someone's family. What does that mean? Had Alex insulted Jack earlier? Had he said something about Jack's family and then simply ignored Jack's reaction? Treated it like it wasn't even worth his time? Whatever happened before this moment, Jack had reached his breaking point. "You think you're so cool in that stupid hoodie?" he spat. "You think that makes you tough?" Alex's hand moved to his hood, slowly, deliberately. He pulled it up over his head, shadows falling across his face. And in that moment, according to witnesses later interviewed, something changed in his eyes, something dark, something hungry. "Why don't you find out?" Alex said quietly. Jack threw the first punch. A hard right hook aimed straight at Alex's jaw. It connected. The sound echoed through the hallway, that sickening crack of knuckles against bone. The crowd gasped. Alex's head snapped to the side. But he didn't fall. He didn't even stumble. He just stood there, slowly turned his head back to face Jack, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth, and he smiled. "That all you got?" he whispered. Before Jack could react, before anyone could intervene, Alex struck. His fist drove into Jack's stomach with brutal force. Not a wild swing, not a panicked reaction. A calculated, precise blow that lifted Jack off his feet. Alex caught him midair with an underhook, using Jack's own momentum against him, and slammed him down onto the hard tile floor. The sound witnesses said they'd never forget the sound, the impact, the crack. And then Jack's scream, broken, wet, agonized. Teachers rushed in. Students scattered. Someone called an ambulance. And Alex? Alex just stood there, hood still up, looking down at Jack's writhing form, and he felt satisfaction. Pure, undiluted satisfaction. The kind that makes your whole body warm. The kind that makes you want more. He wrote about it that night. It felt so good. It really did. But then his parents called him downstairs and the entry cut off abruptly. What did they say to him? How did they react when they heard what happened? We can only imagine the conversation, the shock, the disbelief, the beginning of their fear. April 14th, 4 days after the fight. Jack was still in the hospital, still in pain, still spitting blood. The doctors were confused. The injury shouldn't have been this severe. Yes, it was a hard punch. Yes, Jack had hit the floor hard. But the internal damage, it was excessive, disproportionate. Like something had ruptured inside him that shouldn't have been affected by a simple fight. Jack's parents called Alex's house. His mother answered, her voice shaking, and handed the phone to her son. Alex listened as Jack's father explained the situation. The bleeding, the pain, the uncertainty of recovery. We just want you to know, Jack's father said, his voice thick with emotion. We're not pressing charges. Jack threw the first punch. We know that. But he's suffering. He's really suffering. And we thought you should know. There was a pause. A long, heavy pause where Jack's father waited for some response, some expression of remorse, some sign of humanity. And then Alex spoke. That's good to hear. His voice was blank, empty, like he was commenting on the weather, like Jack's suffering was just information, data, nothing more. He hung up the phone and went back to his room, closed the door, looked at himself in the mirror wearing his hoodie hood up, and he smiled. Because hearing about Jack's pain, it felt good. It felt right. He wrote in his journal, I don't care about Jack. I smiled at his pain. I keep staring. I keep staring at my mirror. I'm always wearing my favorite hoodie. It feels so empowering. But then something interesting happened. His friends, the few who still talked to him, started making jokes, comparing him to Spider-Man in the black symbiote suit. You know the story, right? How Spider-Man found that alien costume that made him stronger, more aggressive, more violent. How it brought out his darkest impulses. How he eventually had to reject it before it consumed him. Completely. His friends laughed about it. Dude, you're like Peter Parker with the Venom suit, they'd say, punching his arm playfully. Better be careful or you'll go full villain. But Alex didn't laugh. He thought about it, really thought about it. And he came to a conclusion that he wrote in his journal. Spider-Man threw his power away. I don't plan on doing anything with my source of confidence. Read that again. I don't plan on doing anything with my source of confidence. Not I don't plan on throwing it away, not I'll be more careful. But I don't plan on doing anything. As if he'd already decided. As if he'd already accepted what he was becoming. And maybe he was right to compare himself to that story, because in folklore and fiction alike, we see this pattern repeated over and over. The cursed object, the corrupting influence, the gradual transformation from human to monster. In Norse mythology, we have the cursed ring, Anvaranaut, that brought ruin to all who possessed it. In Japanese folklore, the Muramasa blades were said to hunger for blood and drive their wielders to violence. Even in modern urban legends, we hear stories of objects, dolls, paintings, jewelry that seem to carry something dark within them. But here's the terrifying question. Was the hoodie actually cursed, or was it simply permission? Permission for Alex to become what he'd always wanted to be. Permission to stop pretending, stop being polite, stop following society's rules. What do you think? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because this is where the story gets truly disturbing. April 22nd, 8 days after the fight, 19 days after Alex bought the hoodie, Jack died. The official cause of death was internal bleeding due to a pre-existing health condition. The punch had ruptured something that was already weak. The fall had caused damage that his body couldn't repair. It was tragic. It was unfortunate. But it wasn't murder, not legally. Alex found out when Jack's father called again. This time his voice was different, hollow, broken. "Jack has gone to a better place," he said, the words mechanical, rehearsed. The kind of thing people say when they don't know what else to say, when the pain is too great for original thought. Alex stood in his kitchen, phone pressed to his ear, wearing his hoodie. Always wearing his hoodie. And he listened. He listened to Jack's father cry. Listened to the man's voice crack and break. Listened to the raw, primal grief of a parent who'd lost a child. And he felt nothing. No guilt, no remorse, no sadness. Just that same satisfaction from before, now mixed with something new, something darker. A sense of completion, of finality, of power. He'd killed someone. Maybe not intentionally. Maybe not with premeditation. But his actions had directly led to another person's death, and instead of horror, he felt pride. He visited Jack's house that day, paid his respects, as they say. Jack's mother answered the door, her eyes red and swollen from crying. She looked at Alex, and in that look, he saw the truth. She knew. Maybe not consciously, maybe not with evidence or proof, but on some deep instinctual level, she knew that her son's death was this boy's fault. She didn't say anything, just stared at him with those hollow, knowing eyes, and then stepped aside to let him in. Alex wrote about it later. "I need to think about what I've done, right? That'll fix my feelings. But what is there to think about? Regret is a foolish emotion. I don't need regret." Do you hear that? Do you hear the rationalization? The justification? This is how it happens. This is how ordinary people become monsters, not through some dramatic transformation, not through possession or supernatural influence, but through choice, through the slow, steady erosion of empathy, through the deliberate rejection of conscience. Psychologists call it moral disengagement. It's a process where people convince themselves that harmful actions are acceptable. They minimize the consequences. They blame the victim. They dehumanize their targets. And step by step, choice by choice, they become capable of atrocities. But was Alex doing this on his own, or was something helping him along, encouraging him, whispering in his ear every time he put that hood up? April 24th, 2 days after Jack's death. The funeral was tomorrow. The whole school would be there. Everyone except Alex. Because nobody wanted him there. Nobody could even look at him anymore. His father had been avoiding him for days, would leave rooms when Alex entered, would find excuses to work late, would sleep on the couch instead of passing by Alex's bedroom to get to the master suite. His mother was the opposite. She'd constantly tell him she loved him, her voice desperate, pleading, like she was trying to remind him of his humanity, trying to call back the sun she'd raised from whatever darkness was consuming him. They both wanted him to feel guilt, endless, crushing guilt. They wanted him to break down, to cry, to show some sign that he was still human, still capable of remorse. But he couldn't, or wouldn't. Even he wasn't sure which. He could fake it for the public. He'd practiced in the mirror, a sad face, the downcast eyes, the trembling lip. He could perform grief if necessary, but inside there was nothing. Just that cold, empty satisfaction. That sense of power, that knowledge that he'd done something most people never do. He'd ended a life. At school, everything had changed. The hallways that once buzzed with mindless chatter now fell silent when he approached. Students would press themselves against lockers, creating a path for him like he carried some invisible plague. And maybe he did. Maybe they could sense it, that darkness that clung to him like a second shadow. Everyone who knew Jack glared at him with open hatred. But it was a hatred mixed with something else, something primal, fear, pure instinctual fear, the kind that makes your body tense up, the kind that triggers your fight or flight response. They looked at him the way prey looks at a predator. His friends, or the people who used to be his friends, had transferred out of his classes. Some had even switched schools entirely. They'd rather uproot their entire academic lives than sit in the same room with him for 50 minutes a day. Think about that. Think about what kind of presence someone has to make people flee like that. And the teachers? They were the most interesting. They didn't look at him, didn't call on him, didn't enforce rules when he broke them. It was like he'd become invisible, or worse, like he'd become something they were too afraid to acknowledge. Alex attested this theory one day during history class. Mr. Patterson was droning on about World War II, his back to the class, as he wrote dates on the whiteboard. Alex picked up his pencil, aimed, and threw it. Hard. It spun through the air and struck Mr. Patterson right in the shoulder blade. The class went silent. Everyone stared, waiting for the explosion, waiting for Mr. Patterson to turn around and send Alex to the principal's office, waiting for consequences. Mr. Patterson froze. His hand stopped mid-word. His shoulders tensed. For a long moment, he just stood there, chalk pressed against the board. Then he continued writing, like nothing had happened, like a pencil hadn't just been thrown at him, like Alex didn't exist. And Alex? Alex smiled under his hood, because he understood now he was beyond their rules, beyond their authority. They were too afraid to confront him, too afraid to even acknowledge what he'd become. He wrote that night, "Everyone either hates me and probably wants me dead, or they fear me. My writing is the only comfort I have. I can be at peace and let myself go." But here's what's truly chilling about that entry. He said his writing was his only comfort, not his family, not his remaining acquaintances, not any human connection, just words on paper, just the act of documenting his transformation, like he was studying himself, observing his own descent with the clinical detachment. There's a psychological phenomenon called depersonalization. It's when people feel disconnected from themselves, like they're watching their own life from outside their body. But what Alex was experiencing was different. He wasn't disconnected. He was hyper-connected, hyper-aware. He was documenting every thought, every feeling, every change, like a scientist recording an experiment. Or like something else was recording through him, using him to document its own awakening. Can you imagine being in that school, walking those hallways, knowing that someone like Alex was there wearing that hood, carrying that darkness? How would you feel? What would you do? Let me know in the comments, because I honestly don't know if I could handle it. April 25th, the day everything changed forever. The day Alex crossed a line that can never be uncrossed. The journal entry for this day is disturbing. More disturbing than anything that came before because it's fragmented, panicked. The handwriting is messy, rushed, like it was written in a state of shock or adrenaline, and it's short, terrifyingly short. They provoked me. They threatened me. I had no choice. They would have killed me. My hood protected my face. The knife naturally moved from Rob's hand to mine. I didn't mean to. And then just a line. A single scratched line across the page, like the pen dragged as he was pulled away from the journal, or like he couldn't bring himself to finish the sentence. What happened that day? The police reports fill in some blanks, but not all of them. Not the important ones. It was after school. Alex was walking home, taking his usual route through the park. It was getting dark, that twilight hour when shadows grow long and the world takes on a different quality, when things that seem safe in daylight become threatening. 3 guys were waiting for him. Rob, Marcus, and Tyler. They were Jack's friends, his best friends. And they'd been planning this for days, waiting for the right moment, the right place, somewhere isolated, somewhere without witnesses. They stepped out from behind the trees as Alex passed, surrounded him, 3 against 1, and they were angry, furious, grief-stricken, and looking for revenge. "You killed him," Rob said, his voice shaking with rage. "You killed Jack, and you don't even care." Alex stopped walking, slowly turned to face them, and reached up to pull his hood up over his head. That deliberate motion, that ritual he'd developed, the transformation from Alex into something else. "He threw the first punch," Alex said calmly. "I was defending myself." "Defending yourself?" Marcus stepped forward, fists clenched. "He's dead. You didn't just defend yourself, you murdered him." "That's not what the police said." "Screw what the police said," Tyler shouted. "We know what you did. We know what you are." And then Rob pulled out a knife, a hunting knife with a 6-inch blade that gleamed in the fading light. "You're not walking away from this," he said. "Not this time. Jack deserves justice, real justice." Now here's where the story gets murky. Here's where we have to rely on Alex's fragmented journal entry and the conflicting statements given to police later. Because what happened next, nobody can quite agree on. According to Rob, Marcus, and Tyler, they were just trying to scare Alex, just trying to make him feel the fear that Jack must have felt. The knife was meant to intimidate, not to harm. They swear they never intended to actually use it. But according to Alex, they attacked him, threatened to kill him, gave him no choice but to defend himself, again. The physical evidence tells a different story, a more disturbing story. When police arrived at the scene 20 minutes later, they found Rob on the ground, bleeding from multiple stab wounds. Marcus was unconscious, his skull fractured from blunt force trauma. Tyler was the only one still standing, but he was in shock, unable to speak, just pointing at Alex with a trembling hand. "And Alex?" Alex was sitting on a park bench, hood still up, the knife resting on his lap, covered in blood. Not his blood, their blood. And he was calm, eerily calm, like he'd just finished a workout, like violence was exercise. The knife had naturally moved from Rob's hand to Alex's, he wrote. Naturally, like it was meant to be, like the universe had orchestrated this moment, like destiny had placed that weapon in his palm. But witnesses, people who lived in houses bordering the park, told police they'd heard screaming, lots of screaming, and not just the victim's screams. They heard someone laughing, a cold, hollow laugh that echoed through the trees, a laugh that didn't sound quite human. One witness, an elderly woman named Mrs. Chen, told police something that never made it into the official report. She said she'd looked out her window when she heard the commotion, said she saw the fight, saw the boy in the black hoodie moving with impossible speed, saw him dodge attacks that should have connected, saw him strike with precision that seemed trained, professional, like he'd done this before, many times before. His hood was up, she told the officer, her voice shaking. I couldn't see his face clearly, but his eyes, I saw his eyes. They reflected the streetlight like an animal's eyes, like a wolf or a cat's. That's not normal. That's not human. The officer wrote it off as an elderly woman's imagination. Trick of the light, stress of witnessing violence. But Mrs. Chen knew what she saw, and she never walked through that park again. April 30th, 5 days later, 5 days of interrogation, 5 days in a holding cell, 5 days of lawyers and police officers and psychologists trying to understand what happened in that park. Rob survived, but barely. He'd lost a lot of blood. The knife wounds were deep, precise, targeting major muscle groups to incapacitate rather than kill. Like Alex had known exactly where to strike, like he'd studied anatomy, or like something had guided his hand with expert knowledge. Marcus had a severe concussion and memory loss. He couldn't remember the attack clearly, just fragments. Just images of a hooded figure moving through shadows. Just the sound of that laugh. Tyler wouldn't talk at all, and he'd gone completely mute. The trauma had broken something inside him. He'd just sit in his room, staring at the wall, flinching whenever anyone wore a hood near him. The evidence was contradictory. The witnesses were unreliable. And Alex's story, that he was defending himself against 3 attackers with a knife, was plausible enough. Self-defense. That's what his lawyer argued. A young man, already traumatized by the death of a classmate, attacked by that classmate's friend seeking revenge. What choice did he have? The prosecutor wanted to push for attempted murder, wanted to argue premeditation, but there was no proof. No evidence that Alex had planned this, no evidence that he'd even known they'd be waiting for him. And Alex played his part perfectly. In the interrogation room, he was the traumatized victim, shaking hands, tearful eyes, voice breaking as he described his fear. I thought they were going to kill me, he said. I thought I was going to die. I just reacted. I didn't mean to hurt them so badly. I was just so scared. The detectives looked at each other. They didn't believe him. They could sense something was off, something was wrong with this kid. But sensing isn't evidence. Intuition isn't proof. After 5 days, they let him go. Self-defense? Case closed. Alex walked out of that police station, a free man. His parents were waiting in the car. They drove home in silence. Complete, suffocating silence. And when they got home, Alex went straight to his room, closed the door, and listened. He could hear them talking downstairs, his mother crying. His father's voice low and urgent. We can't keep him here, his father said. Not after this. Not after everything. He's dangerous. Our son is dangerous. He's our son, his mother sobbed. We can't just abandon him. He needs help. He needs to be somewhere else. Somewhere we're not. I can't sleep knowing he's in the next room. I can't live like this. Alex listened to this conversation and felt nothing. No hurt, no betrayal, no sadness. They wanted him gone. Fine. He'd be gone. He didn't need them anyway. He didn't need anyone. He looked at himself in the mirror. Hood up. Shadows across his face. And he finally understood the truth. The truth he'd been dancing around for weeks. The truth that had been growing inside him since the moment he put on that hoodie. He wrote, I was an idiot to think that this jacket of mine was possessing me or changing my personality. It's just a really cool jacket. I love how it looks. I feel like such a badass. But then he continued, and this is the most chilling part. I remember how I put the hood up. I put it up when Jack challenged me. I put it up when those guys tried to kill me. I feel no remorse. I feel indifferent. I am in control. I have finally come to realize insanity. I wanted to kill them. All of them. I needed only a push and the confidence to fight. I got it. Read that again. I have finally come to realize insanity. Not I've gone insane. Not I'm losing my mind. But I have realized insanity. Like it's a destination, a goal, a state of being he'd been seeking. And then the final line. Mom and Dad are irritating me. They all irritated me. They all irritated me. Not just his parents, everyone, the whole world. Every person who looked at him with fear or judgment or pity. They all irritated him. And we know what Alex did to people who irritated him. The journal ends there. That's the last entry. After that, the pages are blank. Empty. Like Alex had said everything he needed to say. Like the documentation phase was complete. So what happened to Alex? Where is he now? That's the question that haunts investigators to this day. 3 days after his release, Alex disappeared. His parents woke up one morning and he was gone. His room was empty except for his bed and desk. All his clothes were gone. His belongings were gone. And on his bed, folded neatly, was the black hoodie. His parents called the police immediately. But Alex was 18, legally an adult. He had the right to leave. There was no crime. No evidence of foul play. He'd simply left. But here's where it gets truly disturbing. In the weeks and months that followed, there were reports, sightings, incidents. A convenience store robbery 3 towns over. The clerk described the suspect as wearing a black hoodie, face hidden in shadow. The security footage showed a figure moving with unnatural speed, disarming the clerk's gun with professional precision. The suspect took no money, just hurt people. 3 customers were hospitalized. The clerk had nightmares for years. A home invasion in the next state. Family of 4. The father described waking up to find someone standing at the foot of his bed, hood up, just watching. When he tried to move to protect his family, the figure moved faster than should be possible. The father ended up in the hospital. The mother had a breakdown. The children refused to sleep in the dark ever again. A string of assaults in a major city, always at night, always targeting people alone, always someone in a black hoodie. Victims described the same thing, eyes that reflected light like an animal's, movements that seemed almost supernatural, and that laugh, that cold, hollow laugh. Were these all Alex? Oh, impossible to say. Black hoodies are common. Violent crimes happen every day. It could be coincidence. It could be copycats. It could be urban legend growing from a kernel of truth. But the investigators who worked Alex's case don't think so. They've been tracking these incidents, mapping them, and they form a pattern, a trail, like someone is moving across the country, leaving violence in their wake, like someone is hunting. Detective Sarah Morrison, who led the original investigation, has made it her mission to find Alex. She's retired now, but she still follows the reports, still tracks the sightings, still believes that one day she'll catch him. I interviewed her for this story, asked her what she thought really happened. Was it the hoodie? Was it possession? Was it just a disturbed young man who found an excuse to embrace his darkness? She was quiet for a long time. Then she said something I'll never forget. I've been a cop for 30 years. I've seen evil, real evil. The kind that makes you question everything you believe about humanity. And I've learned that evil doesn't need supernatural explanations. People are capable of terrible things all on their own. But Alex, there was something different about him. Something in his eyes, like he wasn't just choosing to be evil, like he was becoming something else, transforming. And that hoodie was part of it. Not because it was cursed or possessed, but because it gave him permission. It gave him an identity, a mask to hide behind. And once you put on that mask, once you separate yourself from your humanity, there's no coming back. She paused, then added, "The scariest part? I don't think he's alone. I think there are others like him out there. People who find their own hoodies, their own excuses, their own permission to become monsters, and will never catch them all." Let's talk about the psychology and folklore behind the story. Because whether you believe in cursed objects or not, there's something deeply unsettling about the idea that an item, a simple piece of clothing, could change who you are. Throughout history, humans have attributed power to objects. In ancient Egypt, amulets were believed to carry the power of gods. In medieval Europe, relics of saints were thought to perform miracles. In modern times, we have lucky charms, wedding rings, family heirlooms, objects we imbue with meaning and power. But what about cursed objects? Objects that bring harm instead of good. The concept appears in almost every culture. In Japanese folklore, tsukumogami are objects that gain sentience after existing for 100 years, and some become vengeful spirits. The Muramasa swords were legendary blades said to be cursed, driving their wielders to bloodlust and madness. Samurai who owned these swords often met violent ends, and the blades were eventually banned by the Tokugawa shogunate. In European folklore, we have the story of the Barnsley shirt, a cursed garment that brought death to multiple owners, or the Bassano vase, a 15th century silver vase that allegedly caused the death of everyone who possessed it. These stories persist because they tap into a primal fear that objects can carry intentions, that they can want things, that they can influence us in ways we don't understand. But here's the scientific perspective. Psychologists have identified something called enclothed cognition, the systematic influence that clothes have on the wearer's psychological processes. Studies have shown that people who wear lab coats perform better on attention-related tasks. People who wear formal business attire think more abstractly and make better long-term decisions. Athletes who wear red are statistically more likely to win competitions. Why? Because clothing changes how we perceive ourselves. It changes our posture, our confidence, our behavior. We become the role we're dressed for. So was Alex's hoodie cursed? Or did it simply give him permission to become what he'd always want to be? Did it unlock something dark within him, or did it just provide the confidence to express what was already there? Dr. James Whitmore, a criminal psychologist I consulted for this story, explained it this way. Many serial killers and violent offenders describe a moment of transformation, a point where they stopped being their normal self and became their true self. Often this transformation is associated with an object, a place, or a ritual. The BTK killer had his hit kit. The Zodiac killer had his costume. These objects don't cause the violence. They facilitate it. They create psychological distance between the person and their actions. They allow the individual to compartmentalize, to say, "That wasn't me. That was the person wearing the mask." He continued. In Alex's case, the hoodie served this purpose. When he put the hood up, he wasn't Alex anymore. He was the hooded man, a different entity, an identity without conscience, without remorse, without the social conditioning that normally prevents violence. And the more he inhabited that identity, the more it consumed his original personality until there was no Alex left, only the hooded man. But I want you to think about something. How many of us have our own hoodies? Not literal clothing, but psychological masks we wear? Identities we adopt that allow us to behave in ways we normally wouldn't? Online personas that let us be cruel without consequence? Professional roles that let us make harmful decisions without feeling personally responsible? The line between normal behavior and monstrous behavior is thinner than we like to believe. And sometimes, all it takes is permission. Permission to stop pretending. Permission to embrace our darkest impulses. Permission to become what we've always secretly wanted to be. That's the real horror of the story. Not that a hoodie was cursed, but that maybe it wasn't. Maybe Alex was always capable of this violence. Maybe we all are. And maybe all we need is the right trigger, the right excuse, the right piece of clothing to hide behind. Let me tell you about some of the reported sightings of the hooded man. Because even though we can't confirm these are all Alex, the pattern is disturbing. Incident 1, Portland, Oregon, June 2004. A woman named Jennifer Hayes was walking home from her night shift at a hospital. It was 2 a.m., streets empty. That eerie quiet that cities get in the dead hours. She heard footsteps behind her, turned around, saw a figure in a black hoodie about 20 feet back. She walked faster. The footsteps matched her pace. She crossed the street. The figure crossed too. She started running, and the figure laughed. That same cold, hollow laugh that witnesses from the park had described. Jennifer made it to her apartment building, fumbled with her keys, got inside, and locked the door. She looked through the peephole. The figure was standing right outside, hood up, face in shadow, just standing there, staring at the door. She called the police. When they arrived, 10 minutes later, the figure was gone. But on her doorstep, they found something, a note, written in neat handwriting. "You run well, but everyone stops eventually." The handwriting matched Alex's journal entries. The police confirmed it. But by the time they investigated, there was no trace of anyone. No fingerprints, no DNA, nothing. Jennifer moved to a different state the next week. She still checks her doorstep every night before going inside. Incident 2, Chicago, Illinois, September 2004. A group of college students were walking through an alley after a party. Drunk, loud, careless. They saw someone sitting on a dumpster. Black hoodie. Hood up. Just sitting there in the darkness, perfectly still. One of the students, a guy named Marcus, yes, same name as one of Alex's victims, make of that what you will, called out, "Hey man, you okay?" The figure's head turned, slowly, unnaturally slowly, like an owl rotating its neck. "I'm perfect," the figure said. The voice was calm, pleasant even. "Are you?" The students laughed nervously, started to walk past. And then the figure spoke again. "You shouldn't walk through dark places. You never know what's waiting." One of the students, a girl named Amy, told police later that she felt compelled to look back. She didn't want to. Every instinct told her to keep walking. But she looked back anyway. The figure was gone, vanished, like it had never been there at all. But on the wall behind where it had been sitting, someone had spray-painted a message. "I see you." The students ran, all of them. Ran until they reached a well-lit street with people, and none of them ever walked through an alley at night again. Incident 3, Denver, Colorado, December 2004. This one is the most disturbing, because this time someone died. A man named Robert Chen, no relation to Mrs. Chen from earlier, was found in his apartment. Cause of death, multiple stab wounds. But the crime scene was strange. There were no signs of forced entry, no signs of struggle. The apartment was neat, orderly, like Robert had invited his killer inside. On Robert's computer, police found his browser history. He'd been researching the hooded man, reading articles about Alex, following the trail of sightings. He'd even posted on forums claiming he was going to find the hooded man and expose the truth. His last post, made at 11:47 p.m. the night he died, read, "I think I found him. He's here in Denver. I'm going to confront him tomorrow. If anything happens to me, look for a man in a black hoodie. His name is Alex." At 11:52 p.m., someone replied to his post. The username was Hooded Troop. The message was simple. "I'm already here." Police traced the IP address. It came from inside Robert's apartment, posted from his own computer while he was sitting at it. Security footage from Robert's apartment building showed someone entering at 11:55 p.m. Black hoodie, hood up, face obscured. The figure walked straight to Robert's door, knocked. Robert opened it immediately, like he'd been expecting someone. The figure entered. The door closed. And at 12:14 a.m., the figure left, calmly, casually, like nothing had happened. Robert's body was discovered the next morning by his landlord. The detective assigned to the case, a veteran named Michael Torres, told reporters, "This wasn't a random killing. This was a message. Someone is out there, watching these forums, tracking people who are trying to find him, and he's eliminating them one by one." Detective Torres became obsessed with the case, started his own investigation, started tracking the sightings, started building a profile. 3 months later, Detective Torres disappeared. His car was found abandoned on a rural highway. His phone was on the passenger seat, and on the screen was a text message from an unknown number. "Stop looking, or you'll find me." Detective Torres has never been found. I've spent months researching this story, months tracking sightings, interviewing witnesses, studying the pattern, and I've discovered something that keeps me up at night. The hooded man doesn't kill randomly. He's selective, methodical. He targets specific types of people. Type 1, the aggressive. People who confront others, who start fights, who use violence to solve problems, like Jack, like Rob, Marcus, and Tyler. The hooded man seems to seek out aggressive people and neutralize them, sometimes permanently. Type 2, the curious. People who investigate him, who try to find him, who post about him online or track his movements. Like Robert Chen, like Detective Torres. The hooded man doesn't like being hunted, and he eliminates hunters. Type 3, the vulnerable. This is the most disturbing category. People who are alone, isolated, walking through dark places at night. The hooded man seems to enjoy stalking these victims, terrorizing them. Sometimes he kills them. Sometimes he just watches, follows, leaves messages, like he's playing a game. But here's the pattern I noticed. The frequency is increasing. In 2004, there were maybe a dozen confirmed sightings. In 2005, there were 30. In 2010, there were over 100. By 2020, there were reports almost every week. Either the hooded man is getting more active, or there are multiple hooded men. Copycats. People inspired by the original. People who found their own black hoodies and decided to become their own versions of the legend. Dr. Whitmore, the criminal psychologist, calls this infectious violence. He explained, when a particular type of crime or criminal becomes famous, it inspires others. The Zodiac Killer inspired dozens of copycats. School shootings inspire more school shootings. And the Hooded Man is inspiring a new generation of violent individuals who see him as a symbol, a representation of freedom from social constraints, permission to embrace their darkest impulses. He paused, then added something chilling. The original Alex might be dead by now, might have been caught, might have simply stopped. But it doesn't matter, because the Hooded Man is bigger than Alex now. It's an idea, an identity. And ideas are much harder to kill than people. Think about that. Right now, somewhere in the world, someone might be putting on a black hoodie, pulling up the hood, looking at themselves in the mirror and feeling that same transformation Alex felt, that same sense of power, that same permission to become something dark. How many hooded men are out there? How many people have found their own cursed objects, their own excuses, their own masks? We'll never know. And that's what makes this story so terrifying. So what's the truth? Was Alex possessed by a cursed hoodie? Or was he just a disturbed young man who found an excuse to embrace his violent nature? I've interviewed psychologists, folklorists, paranormal investigators, and law enforcement. And here's what I've learned. It doesn't matter. Whether the hoodie was cursed or not, the result is the same. A young man transformed into a monster. And that monster is still out there. Or monsters inspired by him are out there. The distinction is meaningless to the victims. But I'll tell you what I believe after months of research, after reading Alex's journal entries over and over, after tracking the sightings and studying the pattern. I believe the hoodie wasn't cursed. I believe it was just a hoodie. A simple piece of clothing that happened to fit well and look cool. Nothing supernatural, nothing magical. But I also believe that Alex wanted to change, wanted to become something different, something powerful, something free from the constraints of morality and society. And the hoodie gave him permission, gave him an identity to hide behind, gave him the confidence to become what he'd always wanted to be. The real curse wasn't in the fabric. It was in Alex's mind, in his choices, in his gradual rejection of empathy and embrace of violence. The hoodie was just a symbol, a focal point, a mask. And that's more terrifying than any supernatural explanation, because it means anyone can become the hooded man. All you need is permission. All you need is an excuse. All you need is something to hide behind. Maybe it's a hoodie. Maybe it's an online persona. Maybe it's alcohol or drugs or anger or grief. Maybe it's just the darkness that exists in all of us waiting for the right moment to emerge. We all have the capacity for violence, for cruelty, for evil. The only thing separating us from monsters is choice. The choice to resist. The choice to maintain our humanity. The choice to not put on the mask. Alex made his choice. He chose the mask. He chose the transformation. He chose to become the hooded man. What choice will you make? There's one more thing I need to tell you. One more detail from Alex's journal that I haven't mentioned yet. In several entries, Alex talks about staring at himself in the mirror, about how the hoodie made him look different, feel different, about how he would spend hours just looking, studying his reflection. Mirrors have always held a special place in folklore and superstition. In many cultures, mirrors are believed to be portals to other worlds, windows into the soul, reflections of our true selves. There's a Jewish tradition of covering mirrors during mourning because the soul is vulnerable and might be trapped by its reflection. In Chinese folklore, mirrors can reveal demons and spirits invisible to the naked eye. In Western superstition, breaking a mirror brings 7 years of bad luck because you're breaking your soul's reflection. What if Alex saw something in that mirror? Not a cursed hoodie, not a supernatural force, but his true self, the self he'd been hiding, the self he'd been suppressing, the darkness that exists in all of us, but that most of us never acknowledge. What if the mirror showed him who he really was? And what if he liked what he saw? There's a psychological concept called the shadow self, the part of our personality that we repress, the dark thoughts we don't acknowledge, the violent impulses we suppress, the cruelty we're capable of but choose not to express. Carl Jung, the famous psychologist, believed that the shadow self must be acknowledged and integrated, or it will control us from the unconscious. He said, everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. What if Alex's mistake wasn't putting on the hoodie? What if his mistake was looking in the mirror and accepting his shadow self, embracing it, becoming it? And here's the truly terrifying question. What would you see if you looked in the mirror right now? Really looked. Past the face you show the world. Past the person you pretend to be. Deep into your shadow self. If you've made it this far, then you've already done what so many others did before you. You read. You leaned in. You wanted to understand. And that is the moment when this stops being just a story. The hooded man was never meant to be one person. He never had to be. He is an idea, a feeling, a moment where weakness meets permission. Every time someone wears something that makes them feel like they're no longer themselves, every time someone justifies their anger, every time someone says, that wasn't me, it was something inside me, the shadow grows. Maybe Alex disappeared. Maybe he died. Maybe he became nothing more than a legend. But the mask is still here. It may not be black. It may not be a hoodie. It could be a screen, a username, a job, a position of power, or silence. And if right now you feel uncomfortable, if this story feels a little too close, or if you glanced around the room while reading, then there is only one question left to ask yourself. If you were given a mask that granted you permission to become the worst version of yourself, would you put it on? Because this is the only truth that matters. Not everyone meets the hooded man. But everyone has the potential to become him.